welcome to this week's DBT skill. I'm Samantha, so I'll be walking us through a brief mindfulness exercise as well as a quick review of last week's skill. And I will be reviewing this week's new skill. For our opening mindfulness today, I'm going to be sharing my screen to the whiteboard, which will have a prompt for you. You may need to pause for a moment to gather any sort of writing utensils and materials you might need. So maybe a scrap piece of paper, a journal, if you keep one, and a pen, pencil, colored pencil, anything you have on hand. If those things are not accessible to you and you have your phone readily available, you can also use that to write out some notes in your notes app. In a moment here, you should see a prompt that comes up. And really the purpose and intention for today's mindfulness is to pull on some of the skills that you learned last week, specifically the give skill and thinking about validation. What I'd like you to do is think about, when was the last time you really felt seen or heard by someone in your life? What did this person say to you that made you feel really seen? How did they show you that they were really listening and hearing you? What were their actions, or what was their body language like? Really use your mindfulness observe and describe skills here. What did you notice? What did you observe that this other person did or said? Then reflect on a time you felt really validated and understood. So really just writing about this time. So go ahead and you can pause this video to take 2 to 5 minutes to journal and write about this experience. Now that you've completed this, I'd like you to just take one more final moment to think about what it was like to write out this experience. What emotions came up for you? How did it feel for you to reflect on this interaction with this person? Last week, you learned 2 different skills. You learned the give and the fast skill. We're going to briefly go over those just to do a quick recap and to have you reflect on how you practice these skills this past week. If you had trouble with practicing them, please bring this into your next individual therapy session so you can troubleshoot and detect what maybe got in the way of practicing these skills. Like a lot of things in DBT, both the give and the fast are acronyms to help us remember those skills. The give skill, we'll talk about that first. This skill is all about how to maintain healthy relationships. Once we've established a new connection, we've made a new friend, how the heck do we keep that friendship or that connection going? The G stands for being gentle. So taking a gentle approach when we're engaging with that person. So being mindful of our tone of voice, our body language. The I stands for acting interested. And this is really just like using some of our either our nonverbal cues or even verbal cues to let the person know that we're listening or that we're interested in what they have to say. Even if we're not interested in what they're saying, that's okay, right? We can have relationships where we have different passions, different interests, and it's still helpful and important to share what those interests are. If your best friend just won a championship soccer game, being a cheerleader for them, acknowledging that, asking how it went can really go a long way for that person. The V is validate. So we talked a little bit about this in opening mindfulness, but validation is all about making a person feel seen and heard. And so maybe there's lots of different ways that we can validate, but through our words, we can maybe summarize what that person just said, saying something like, it sounds like you said blah, blah, blah. We can also try and get a sense of what that person was feeling. And so if somebody tells you a story about something happening and it doesn't sound like the story is really positive, maybe you get the sense that the person felt really sad. And so maybe naming that of, wow, that sounds like you felt really sad in that moment. So being able to label that emotion, or even just acknowledging, wow, that must have been really hard to do X, Y, or Z thing. So there's just some examples of validating statements. And then the E in give stands for easy manner. So being able to take an easy manner, using humor when appropriate, being able to, when interacting with that person, take a little bit more of a gentle, easy approach. That's the give skill. If you had any issues with it, again, feel free to write them down right now so you don't forget and bring it into your next group, or you probably troubleshoot a little bit more with your individual therapist. The fast skill is all about maintaining self-respect. How can you stick to who you are as a person and not compromise who you are as a person to keep relationships. And this is especially if we struggle with people pleasing, wanting to be liked by others, trying to fit in, right? And all those things are really normal. And we don't want to change who we are just to meet the needs of other people or to have the approval of other people, because then we compromise who we are as a person and that doesn't feel good. The F stands for being fair to ourselves, to other people. Whenever we're in interactions with people, acknowledging that we want to be fair to ourselves. And that can be open for a lot of interpretations or a lot of different examples, but being fair to ourselves and the other person. The A stands for no apologizing. And really, this just means like over apologizing or not trying to apologize when we're really not sorry or it's not warranted. A lot of times, people who struggle with people pleasing will over apologize or say, oh, sorry, I can't come to blah, blah, this X, Y, or Z thing, or apologize for making a request, or yeah, apologize for just setting a boundary. And really, we want to pull back on not doing those things because essentially all those things are okay. It's okay to make requests. It's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to say no to things and doing so more confidently. A lot of times when we're over apologizing, it can water down situations and it doesn't necessarily always feel great. The S stands for sticking to our values. So this one's really key here about really acknowledging what's important to you, what's important in your relationships, what's important to you just as a person and your family, community, all those types of things. And so being able to evaluate what are the things that are really important to me, what are my non-negotiables. A lot of times when people want to be well-liked, they might drop their values or compromise who they are as a person. So this one's really important to work on. How can we keep our values and still maintain relationships? And it's okay if we're in relationships where people have different values and that we have different opinions and different perspectives. And at the same time, it's important to really respect your values that you have for yourself. The last part of this skill is being truthful. Being truthful to who you are, being truthful when interacting with other people. And this really comes with reducing any sort of lying patterns that we might engage in, whether they're white lies or other types of lies, really trying to own and be truthful in your interactions. Think about a moment this week where you've maybe practiced some of these things. If you have trouble identifying what your values are or priorities, or even practicing this skill, again, bring it back to your individual sessions. I have our DBT workbook pulled up. This is one of our last skills in the interpersonal effectiveness module. The think skill is all about how to take perspective and look at things from a different person's point of view. And this idea, the idea behind this skill is how can we work on flexible thinking, because this can help improve our relationships. Even if we don't have a similar experience to one of our friends, being able to try and understand what they may be going through or trying to put yourself in their shoes. I'm sure you've heard that saying before, but this can really help us deepen our connection with somebody, deepen our empathy and understanding for that person. Similar to a lot of skills in DBT, this is an acronym. What we need to know here. So the T stands about essentially thinking from the other person's point of view. You know, a lot of times if we see somebody and we don't quite understand their behavior, we might not understand that why somebody is skipping class or not coming to school or not answering your text messages. Sometimes when we can try and think about what might be going on that could explain those behaviors. So we'll talk about that in a few moments, but being able to shift our point of view can be really helpful here to help us think a little bit more outside the box and more broadly about what might be going on with someone. The H, having empathy. As humans, we all go through difficult life experiences. We experience difficult emotions at times. They ebb and flow throughout our life. And so being able to have empathy when somebody might be going through something really difficult, being able to just show that you care, that you understand, even if you don't understand. And maybe that's showing the empathy there. Like, I can't imagine what you're going through and pulling on some of those validation skills that you learned last week. The I stands for interpretations. Can we look outside of the box and think about what might be potential factors that could be playing into a situation? For example, if a person isn't responding to our text? Can we come up with other interpretations than the first one that kind of pops in our head, right? Maybe we have this thought of they no longer want to be our friend, when really there could be a lot of different interpretations. Maybe they got their phone taken away. Maybe their phone died. Maybe they are at cheerleading practice and aren't on their phone. Maybe they're just doing homework and put their phone away. There's lots of different things that we can come up with that could explain someone's behavior. So being able to come up with potential interpretations. How else could this make sense? The N stands for notice. So being able to notice, really utilizing our observe skill here. Like when we think about noticing another person's behavior, noticing their tone of voice, being able to really observe these things. So again, this goes very hand in hand with the mindfulness observe skill, being able to recognize and notice things. Especially a lot of times when we get caught up in our emotions or we get caught up in relationships, sometimes it is hard for us to notice what another person might be experiencing or notice what is going on in our surroundings. So being able to stop, reflect, notice our environment, notice the other person, notice the interaction and how it's going can be really helpful here. And then the K, so using kindness here. When we're thinking about looking at somebody's, like shifting our perspective, looking at something in a different way, again, being able, can we show a person compassion, grace, kindness? How can we show that? And so that could be a lot of different ways. It could be through our actions by doing something really kind for somebody else. Maybe it's through our words, sending them a really kind, heartfelt message, letting a person know, hey, I really care about you, and showing up for them and showing some gratitude and kindness. That was the what to know. Now, this part of how to practice. These are just some examples here. Take perspectives from others' thoughts and feelings in your interaction. So again, being able to take a step back and see how might this other person be seeing this experience? How might this other person be viewing this experience through their eyes? Everyone has different experiences in life, and so we all might look at different things in a different way based on our own lived experience. Practice empathy by considering how others may be thinking or feeling. Maybe one of my really good friends is going through something that I have never gone through before. Maybe they experienced a loss of some sort that I haven't experienced. And so I might not understand exactly what they're going through, but I can try and empathize and show empathy by maybe considering that, like, this loss that they're going through would feel really sad. Being able to name that, label that, showing up for them, giving them those validating statements of, I can't imagine what this must feel like. You must be heartbroken or you must be really sad. The last tip here of how to practice is reduce negative feelings in interactions by understanding others' perspectives and improving communication. So this kind of goes similarly to the example I shared about somebody that might leave you on red. We might have some negative feelings or interpretations about that because we might have this thought that they're blowing us off. However, we might not fully understand that other person's perspective or point of view. And so being able to come up with multiple interpretations, maybe having a direct conversation with them to better understand their point of view, as opposed to just assuming. This can really help improve communication, improve relationships when we can have that open dialogue. So being able to, again, try and getting curious about it, asking questions to better understand another person's perspective and how they're seeing it, because they might be seeing it in a totally different way than how we're seeing the situation. All right, so here are some examples that we're going to go through. So the T is think. So consider how the other person may be looking at the situation, take perspective. Here's the example. I wonder if he misinterpreted my statement and is thinking in a different direction. H, having empathy. Consider how a person may be feeling or thinking to try and understand that their perspective makes sense. Here's an example of having empathy. It makes so much sense that you're feeling this way. Interpretations. Reflect on all possible situations and explanations for a person's behavior. Let's look at all the options here and lay them out, right? Looking at all the different possibilities that could be going on. This is a really similar step to when you're checking the facts. So linking it here to another skill that some of you may or may not have learned yet. But if you have learned check the facts, that part of the process in checking the facts is looking at all possible interpretations. So this is no different here. We're just looking at what are possible situations and explanations that could be going on here. N is notice. Again, practice using your mindfulness skills to notice and observe how the person might be trying to improve the situation. Here's the example. Although they made a mistake, it seems like they are really trying to be skillful in their direct communication and taking responsibility. Okay. The last one, kindness. Using kindness in your approach with folks. Practice gentleness in your interactions. And like I was saying earlier, you can practice kindness through a lot of different ways, through your words, tone of voice, body language, actions. Maybe it's just sending off a really kind and thoughtful text to a friend. And so you can really get creative here. Story time. I'm going to read this example, the story, and then I'd invite you to pause the video to reflect and journal. So you can use that same piece of paper you had recently. You can pull out your phone, write a few notes. Here's the example of the story. So taking perspective can help us try and understand what another person may be thinking and feeling. Although people never truly know what someone is going through, taking perspective can help build empathy. Kathleen has been working on trying to have empathy for her friend Ella, whose parents are getting a divorce. Although Kathleen does not know what this is like from her own experience, she attempts to use the think skill by seeing things through Ella's point of view. She does this by actively listening to Ella's perspective, using validation skills, and thinking of multiple explanations and interpretations for Ella's behaviors. Question here, how can the think skill strengthen Kathleen and Ella's friendship? So go ahead and pause, reflect on this prompt here. Okay, welcome back. Here are some examples of how you can practice this in your home after we wrap up today's skill. So you can practice this by yourself by choosing a situation where you often experience negative feelings and interactions. Before responding, take a moment to consider the other person's perspective. Write down 3 possible thoughts or feelings they might have. Reflect on how this exercise helps you respond more positively. Okay, so that's an independent way to practice a skill. A way to practice this with a peer. So role play a conversation or interaction where there is potential for negative feelings. Before responding, practice taking the perspective of the other person. Discuss how this approach enhances understanding and improves communication. Then lastly, you can practice this with a caregiver or parent or a trusted adult in your life. So maybe share with a parent a situation where you often experience negative feelings and interactions. Ask for their input on the other person's perspective and potential thoughts or feelings. Practice taking their perspective together and discuss the benefits. So 3 different ways to practice and try this skill, either by yourself, with a friend or a peer, or with a guardian or caregiver. Okay, so home practice this week. This is what we're going to be practicing. You're going to be practicing the think skill. So think about how you practice this skill with either yourself, peer, or caregiver. What was effective? What did you notice? What was different when you practiced this skill? And then how did you feel before and after you practiced this skill? Again, I've said this multiple times. If you have issues or want to talk this a little bit further through, or maybe have some barriers that are coming up in your mind, bring this forth in your next individual therapy session. Okay, that concludes our think skill today. Thank you for joining in this DBT online webinar, and have a good rest of your day.